Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh, everyone, and welcome to our inaugural episode of Muslims in America. I'm your host, Mayor Mohamed T Khairullah from Prospect Park, New Jersey. We often ask ourselves, are we integrated into society and our local communities? My guest of Muslims, elected officials, and influencers will share with you their stories about their own involvement in their local communities and in politics. And then you make your own assessment if you have risen to their level. Let's go. All right, welcome back, everyone. And again, thank you for joining us. This is our inaugural episode, and I couldn't have shared it with anyone but my good friend, Freeholder Assad Akhter, who's been a close friend and ally. And now we start this. Bismillah. Freeholder Assad Akhter was appointed to fill a vacancy on the Passaic County Board of Chosen Freeholders in 2016. He was elected to fill the remainder of the term as freeholder in November 2017 and elected to a full 3-year term in 2018. He is the first South Asian and the first Muslim in the history of Passaic County to serve as freeholder. Prior to becoming an elected official, Assad worked for Congressman Bill Pascrell Jr. over the course of 11 years in both his Washington and New Jersey Congressional office. In his capacity as Deputy Chief of Staff for the Congressman, he was directly responsible for managing the local district office and staff for the 9th Congressional District of New Jersey. Before that, Assad served as a legislative director in the Washington, D.C. office, where he oversaw the Congressman's legislative agenda and staff, as he was tasked with coordinating the Congressman's position on the House Ways and Means Committee, as well as staffing his assignment on the House Homeland Security Committee. During his time as legislative director, Assad was able to work on a number of momentous pieces of legislation, including the Affordable Care Act, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, and the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, all of which were keystones to President Obama's legislative agenda during his first term. During his time on Capitol Hill, Assad was the founding member and served as president of the Congressional Muslim Staff Association. Mr. Assad graduated from Seton Hall University in 2003 with a Bachelor's of Science degree from the School of Diplomacy and International Relationship. He graduated from the Honors Program and also received an Undergraduate Leadership Award program or award from the School of Diplomacy and International Relationship at graduation. Freeholder, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much. It's an honor to have you as our guest for the inaugural show.
Well, assalamu alaikum, Mayor. It's my honor to be here. First of all, thank you for putting this together. This is just one of your many, many efforts. In your capacity, things that you don't have to do, but you've always shown that leadership and mentorship to people like me. I wouldn't be here without your advice and guidance. And I'm hopeful that this effort will help promote other people, not just the next generation, but people even in your generation, my generation, or older, people who are sitting on the bench right now in our community who need to get up and get involved and get active. And so I'm really hopeful for this effort, and thank you for putting it together and for having me. It's a real honor to be your first guest.
My pleasure. So, Freeholder, we all have unique stories. I read your bio, very impressive bio, by the way. But what's between the line? What about Assad Akhter between the lines that inspired you to get involved in the political arena?
Yeah, well, listen, I'm the son of immigrants who came from Pakistan, came here to this country. I was born here. It's always been my home, and I came from a family that talked a lot about politics at the dinner table with friends, with other people, but was not politically active or involved. because they didn't feel it was their role. They felt that they were here to raise their family, to make a living, to work hard, pay their taxes, and all of that. But they didn't necessarily feel that the political arena was one where they should be active. And so I grew up around that environment. I also, when I was in college at Seton Hall, which is right in northern New Jersey, right here in our local area, was 9/11 happened. And we could see the towers burning from the top of one of the residential buildings there. So that's how close we were. So many of us were. That impacted us as Americans, all of us, and as a tragedy. But it also impacted us as Muslim Americans because we saw the way that our rights were taken and twisted. We saw the way that we were demonized and looked at. And so I think it made it very clear for all of us that if we weren't active, if we weren't involved, that we would suffer, that our community would suffer. So I'm just lucky. I'm grateful. I think one of the biggest advantages I've had in my life is that I always had a great interest in these issues. When I was in college, I had a real goal that I wanted to work on Capitol Hill. I'd see those people walking behind congressmen and senators and handing them papers and giving advice and other things. And I always wanted to be one of those people. It was just one of those things that I had in my head. I wanted to do it. I didn't know how. I didn't have any connections. There wasn't necessarily a path. There certainly wasn't too many Muslim American mentors or role models or people I could reach out to. There were a few along the way, but not necessarily somebody from northern New Jersey. I was not politically connected at all, locally or nationally otherwise. And certainly I didn't have any family connections. So that was just something I wanted to do. I didn't know how I'd do it, but I got lucky enough. My parents wanted me to go to law school. I said I'd move to Washington, and I got an entry-level job on the Hill. Working for a congresswoman from Houston, Texas, who was just happened to answer an ad in the paper in one of the Capitol Hill periodicals. And I was able to get a job on the Hill, an entry-level job. And I went to law school at night. And after a year, I realized I either got to dedicate all my time to my job on the Hill, because even though it was an entry-level job, if you wanted to get ahead, you had to put in extra hours, or I had to dedicate myself to law school, which is incredibly tough on its own. And after a year, I said, listen, I know this is a big chance. I know my parents are going to be very upset about it, but I really feel strongly about what I'm doing. I enjoy what I'm doing. And I think I have a path forward, even without a law degree, to work on the Hill. So I left law school. I put myself full-time to that job, which didn't pay much. It worked out for me. I had a 13-year career working for members of Congress, both in Washington and, as you mentioned, locally here when I worked for Congressman Pascrell on Paterson, New Jersey, as Deputy Chief of Staff. So I was able to go from an entry-level job to a more senior-level job over the course of that career. And I'm very proud of that. But I think one of the things is, you talk to people. Sometimes you have to take a chance. People don't understand why I wouldn't have gone to law school, why I would have closed that opportunity. My parents, like I said, not at all happy about that. They were very worried about me. And luckily for me, it worked out. But it worked out because I knew what I wanted to do. I liked it, and I believed I was good at it. And so, sometimes you have to take those chances and get involved. So that's kind of my story. That's kind of how I got started.
Wow, that is amazing. So freeholder, it's becoming a controversial term in New Jersey, and it's probably something that people don't know what it means in other states. And this is obviously being on social media. We're possibly going to have people from out of state. Can you explain to us what a freeholder is? And
Sure.
Can you speak about the transition of the name that's happening right now in New Jersey?
Sure. So freeholder is a term that comes from the very early, pre-American colonial times. Freehold, you had to have, the term comes from, the people who own land. They had freehold of their title to land and title. And so basically only white men were able to own land in colonial America. And so they were the only ones who were able to hold this office. Or hold this title, but it had to do with the owners of land. And so New Jersey was the only one to coin this term. But almost every state has some form of county government, and that's basically what it is. Many states, you have county commissioners, or a county board of supervisors or a county legislature. But New Jersey was the only one that used this term freeholder, and people get confused all the time about what it means. But it's just the form of county government. Now, once you understand that, now you're asking the question, well, what does county government do? And county government is basically the same as municipal government in terms of that, you have representatives who represent you and decide where your tax dollars get spent. And so, we have a board of 7 freeholders in Passaic County. The portion of your property taxes, if you look at your property tax bill, a portion of that goes to the county. And those county dollars are spent on things like county roads. You may not know that your roads are either local roads, county roads, state roads, or federal highways. So county roads are like are a lot of the in New Jersey, a lot of the larger roadways that connect different communities within the county are county roads that you'd be surprised about. So some of the larger 2-lane or 4-lane type roads are often county roads. And so we maintain and design and take care of those roads. We obviously, there's a county sheriff. His budget is passed by the Board of Freeholders, a county jail. You have the county community college, which is the most affordable option for college out there. That's run by the Board of Freeholders. Board of Social Services that gives out welfare programs and others that we administer those. We have like the county senior programs, like Meals on Wheels, that's administered by the county. We have a county housing program. So it goes on and on and on. A lot of programs that you may not otherwise know about are run by the county. And so we as a board of freeholders, just like you would have a town council that decides how those dollars are spent and how those programs are administered. We do the same thing at the county level amongst the 7 of us. Each of us has an equal vote, and each of us represents the entire county at large. And so we get to decide how those dollars are spent. So what happened this year is that because of this conversation, and I'm glad and I'm grateful that we're having this conversation about racial inequality, about our systems, about the built-in systems that of our government and otherwise that are inherently, the racism and discrimination, unfortunately, has been built in from the beginning, unfortunately, and it's had real effects on many communities, most obviously the African American Black community, but it affects many of us. And so people have been saying for a long time the term of freeholder is a term that emanates from the racist concept of only white men owning land, and then therefore having in the beginning of our country, only white men be able to vote. So basically, white men only having the authority to administer their communities, administer their property, and things like that. So once that conversation, and that conversation has been ongoing for many years, but I think there's been an extra focus, and our governor has been very motivated, and so the decision was made by the state legislature that we need to get rid of the title of freeholder because it emanates from a place of discrimination and racism, quite honestly, and so that it would be more progressive and better to change our titles to county commissioners. We're still freeholders to the end of the year, but next year we'll be the Passaic County Board of County Commissioners, like many states who refer to their county officers as county commissioners. So the title will change, but our responsibility, our authority, our terms of office, all of that will be exactly the same, but the title will be changed starting next year to county commissioners.
So thank you for the very thorough explanation. Now, moving on, a lot of people, a lot of Muslims are afraid of getting involved in their local communities because they're worried about the backlash. Can you speak to that? What has been some of the challenges that you went through? What do you recommend? What is your advice to people who want to be involved?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think you and I think it first of all, I think it's more dangerous not to be involved, right? Because it's very well known, and polls have shown this. Americans who don't know any Muslim Americans have a much higher negative feeling about Muslims than those who know Muslim Americans. If your neighbor is Muslim and you know them, if you're a good neighbor at least, it's very unlikely that your neighbor is going to have a negative opinion of Muslim Americans if they know you, right? If they know you through your kid's school, or through your soccer league or whatever. If they know you in some way, if you're active in some way, if they have a positive relationship with you, it's almost impossible for them to have a negative view of Muslim Americans, because once they put a face to it, a personality, it's hard for them to say, well, I know that all Muslim Americans are terrorists. They're not going to say that if they know somebody who is a decent person. It's just very unlikely, and polls have shown this. So the more well known you are, the more involved you are, the more people who are going to be exposed to the fact that we're just like every other American. We're just like every other set of people. And this may seem obvious to us, but again, the lack of knowledge is often based on fear, right? And so and the unknown. And it's no surprise that the communities that have the least diverse populations are the most likely to have these feelings, because they're the least exposed to those people and those cultures and those communities. And they're exposed, and on the opposite side of it, they're exposed to misinformation through TV, through the internet, through others. They're exposed to the stereotypes and other things about our community and other communities, because they don't know any actual, or know very few. Again, I would say being active and being involved is less dangerous than being involved. That being said, I do understand that there are Muslims who live in, we're very lucky, Mayor. I think we're very lucky that we live in a very diverse community. Passaic County, I was very honored to be the first Muslim freeholder in the history of Passaic County. You made history when you became mayor. But we're very lucky that we live in a very diverse community, that has a good deal of a Muslim population, that has a good deal of populations from other faiths, other communities. So we're lucky to live in a diverse community and in a diverse state. There are other Muslims I know who live in states where there are very few of them, and there's very little diversity. And so it's a different situation. I don't think that means you should be less involved, but I understand why they would say it's not the same as what we experience. And I think we have to be cognizant of that. That being said, the best story I can give you is, when I was sworn in as freeholder, quite honestly, it's been a benefit to me. It's been a benefit to me. I don't know about you, Mayor, but overall, when the media, like when I was sworn in as freeholder, there was like 3 or 4 days worth of stories about it in the paper in our area, which is one of the largest in the state. They ran a story about, for 3 or 4 days about it. And it's because I was Muslim American. Quite honestly, the fact that because of my faith, it was an interesting fact to people. It may not be interesting to us, but we may think of it, as not something we want to highlight. But the truth is, people find it interesting, and you can either, or they find it newsworthy, and you can either hide from that, and again, not give them a good example, not give them who you are and what you're about, or you can see it as an opportunity. And I think of it as an opportunity. And quite honestly, as a public official, the fact that there is more of a spotlight on us, I think, again, is more of a chance to talk to folks about who we are and what we're about, and the fact that we care about the great majority of things that our neighbors and other people in the community care about. We don't just care about quote unquote Muslim issues. We certainly don't have another hidden agenda that, certain news outlets or certain internet based information tries to convey. And so I think it's important that you see it's an opportunity. But the story that I just want to bring out is when I was sworn in, I got all this media attention. The great majority of comments I got were positive. But one woman, wrote a letter to the editor, to the newspaper, a few days after I was sworn in, and she said, well, it's great that we have a Muslim freeholder now, and diversity and all that. That's great, but I'm very disappointed in that this is somebody from Patterson, and there's people from she was talking about South Patterson, and that there's parts of Patterson that don't look like America, right? They don't look like America because they have Arabic signs and all of it. The paper had written a story basically saying how great it is that we have this diversity, and that now we have somebody on the freeholder board that represents a lot of this diversity, this growing community. And her point was, it doesn't look like America because this growing community happens to be out there and happens to be proud and happens to have stores and commerce and all of these things. And she said, it just doesn't look like America, right? And if you hear something like that, it's very easy to say, oh, that's an attack on me. That's something I should be upset or fearful of. And I just don't think you can, one voice, whether it be in the newspaper, whether it be on the internet or whatever, you can't be taken down by the naysayers. I mean, again, I think you should be polite with people, but firm with people. I comment and I use that story all over the place to say, like, no, it does look like America. That's the best of America. People who came here from all over the world are creating commerce, are creating jobs, and are celebrating their culture. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's actually one of the strongest neighborhoods in Patterson, and I would say in Passaic County. South Patterson. So I think it's a beautiful thing. I understand that people may not like it when there are signs in English and Arabic, but that's part of America. And we've always been a land of immigrants. And so, you can either see it as something that to be afraid of, or you can see it as an opportunity. I just choose to see it as an opportunity. I think you do too, Mayor. And again, it depends on the way that you look at things. But I think as Muslims, it's incumbent on us to be active, to be participants. Our faith tells us not to just sit back and allow things to happen, that we have to be active in our faith and active. And I interpret that to mean that you have to be active in your communities as well.
Absolutely. And there's definitely a lot that we could add in terms of value to our local communities. And I could share with you, my town was originally established by the Dutch community. And what they tell us is they actually used to run their council meetings in Dutch language until the mid 1950s.
Right.
So, that was the majority here in town. I haven't ran any meetings in Arabic yet. So,
well, no, I'm sure they've accused you of that, though. No, and that's exactly the point. I mean, the immigrants, the Irish immigrants and the Italian immigrants who came to this country were some of the most discriminated against, some of the most attacked immigrant communities in the history of this country. And now they make up such a huge swath of New Jersey and our population that we've forgotten that happened. But it did happen. And it was true. And there was fear created of these, quote unquote, foreign communities. So, people have just turned that around and said, oh, European immigration is fine, but immigration from other countries isn't. Right. And that's just discriminatory and racist. And it ignores the actual history of this country.
Absolutely. So we're heading toward the tail end of this interview, and I know if you and I talk, there's a lot that we could share with each other and with the public. But if someone was to tell you what is the essence, what is the summary of your political experience that you could share with someone who just wants to get started, what can you tell them? What can you teach them if they have a few minutes with you?
Yeah. The thing I always tell people is, listen, I've been lucky enough to be involved in public, public service and, politics for a long time, right? Basically, since I left college, and even when I was in college, I did 2 internships in Washington and, got some experience that way. But I've been involved in this basically since my whole career, right? In one way or another. That's not the way the majority of people can or should get involved in politics, right? Or get involved in some kind of form of public service. When you look at the members of Congress, I worked in Congress for a long time, and you look at these congressmen, everybody just assumes that they are, politicians from who served in other positions, or they're lawyers, or they're people like that. The truth is that if you look at them, there are doctors, there are social workers. There are teachers. There are people from a myriad of different life positions, obviously from the armed services and others. There are people from all over, from different walks of life and different experiences, who got elected to Congress. Now that's just a very high level way to look at it. But if you want to get involved in your local community, there are a lot of ways to do it. I mean, if you're, and I'm a Democrat, you're a Democrat. If you believe in the Democratic Party, and I do, and I would tell you why, but that's for another question. But if you feel strongly about one party or another, There's a lot of ways. That's an easy way to get involved in New Jersey. All the county Democratic parties are active in one way or another. A lot of the towns, a lot of the communities have their own local Democratic Party or local Democratic club that you can get involved with. But if you don't want to do that route, you don't want to be partisan, there are a lot of nonprofits that you can be involved with that are dealing with issues with homelessness or hunger, or dealing with veterans affairs, veterans issues, or education. Obviously, if your children are in the schools, that's a huge way to get involved. My mother, first time she went to a PTA meeting when I started school, she felt very unwelcome, she was not treated like somebody who quote unquote belonged there, right? And that was a big barrier to her. But it's important that we do be involved in our children's schools and in their PTAs and the Board of Education or their meetings. So showing up at places, showing your face. If you do that enough times, even if you don't know anybody, I guarantee you, if you show up at a couple public meetings, you show up at your town council meetings, you show up at your Board of Education meetings, you show up at your PTA, wherever it may be that you get involved. If you just show up, even if you don't know anybody, I guarantee you, people will start to talk to you, and you will get to know people and develop relationships really fast. Because the thing I always tell people is, when it comes to elected office, but also the people who make decisions in other, like, nonprofits or in other walks of life, the people who make these decisions and the people who get elected to office are not necessarily the best and the brightest. There's very rarely a test or a process that determines, the quote unquote best people to be on there. It's not necessarily the best and brightest. It's the people who show up. It's the people who show up and care enough to be there. So when I hear a lot of people in our community and outside of our community, just people who are like, well, I care, it's important to me, but I can't be the one. I can't be the one to show up. It's scary. I'm afraid. I don't want to talk in public. There are better people, quote unquote, better people than me to talk about these issues. I mean, that really, it bothers me. It really angers me when people say that, because I'm like, you should go see the people who are there, right? You should go see for yourself, because in most cases, really, in almost every case, the people who say those things are not just better equipped, but their voices are missing in these conversations, in these decisions, in these actions. So don't be missing. Take the step. Do it for yourself. Do it for your children. Do it for your family. Do it for your community, because it's important. Show up and be active. Just the little things. You don't have to run for office. You don't have to dedicate your life to this. You don't have to make this your career. This is something that you can do on a very part-time basis, but just find some way to contribute, to show up, to be active in your community and the decisions that are made.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And it's a matter of just opening that door, and it's one thing leads to another. I think that's how it was for me. I don't think when I came to the US almost 30 years ago, I thought I'd be mayor. And I don't think probably when you came in, or you started your political career, that you would be a freeholder. You don't know where things will end, and we don't know.
Yeah.
The journey is not over yet as well.
No. Your story is a great example. Your story is a great example. I mean, of how you got involved. English was not, if I'm wrong, English was not your first language. You're a great example of that. And even for me, I was able to get a job on the Hill. I worked my way up. But then when I wanted to get more involved locally in New Jersey and think about running for office, that was like a whole nother group of people. When I worked in Washington, I came back here. Most folks were like, "Who are you and where you been?" Right? And it wasn't. It was not something where you could be big somewhere else, but politics is local. And so I think people are very surprised when when I tell them that some of the most important people, some of the most active people are the Board of Education or people who are very active in the schools. Those are some of the most well-known people. And let me tell you, Mayor, there's few people I have more admiration for than our small town mayors, because they have so much. They have so much work to do, and they don't necessarily have the resources of some of the bigger towns or communities or a county or a state. You have to do so much, and not necessarily with a lot of resources at hand. And so I think people are surprised when I tell them that some of the most influential and active and people who can make the biggest difference are mayors and councils in small towns. because every action you take is so meaningful, to the people you serve. So, I think people, they have it backwards. They always ask me about Congress and the federal government, but really some of the most meaningful things are happening at the local and community level.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your kind words. So
I can take another question or two, Mayor, if you have time. I don't mind.
yeah. I'm not cutting you off. Trust me. We still have at least two major questions.
Okay, great.
So here's the deal. Your family wanted you to be a lawyer. My family wanted me to be a doctor, but typical of our immigrant families, but we're neither a doctor nor a lawyer.
Right.
Your family, how do they handle your activism? You're a father, you're a husband, and you got a full-time job. How do you handle? I think that's important for us to talk to the people who are getting active about balancing.
Sure. Well, I mean, again, I think I think for the average person out there, this is not necessarily a message for the average person out there, right? Because I think the average person, again, you don't need to make this a career. You don't need to run for public office. If you want to, I greatly encourage it. We want you there. But I think, dip your toe in first, right? Get involved at some level, and almost everybody has some time to dedicate to some kind of activity, right? Or if your kids are playing sports and youth sports, that's another place where there's a lot of influence, a lot of relationship building, is youth sports, right? Don't let somebody else take the take the presidency or the membership or the chairmanship or whatever of your youth sports or your schools or your PTA or whatever. That could be you. That should be you. Your voice is needed there. So for the average person, I would say, get involved at a small level, work your way up, see what you like, see where you can be, you can have influence and make a contribution, right? But for the people who are interested in running for public office, I want to encourage you. And I think you and me, I think want to encourage a lot of people who are still active, who are raising a family. You have young children as well, and a family that is growing. You understand this as well. And you have a job, you have a full-time job, and you say, where can I, how can I balance being an elected official? One thing that people don't understand is that most of the positions in New Jersey and really across the country, most of the elected positions are part-time positions. You're expected most of the time to maintain a full-time job. This is why a lot of the people who run for office are usually retirees, or are very young candidates who don't necessarily need they might still live with their parents and they might not need to pay rent or a mortgage, right? So their economic situation, it's not as dire, right? So that's great. We want young people to run. We want retirees and the senior community to run. That's great. But I think you and me and others want the people who are still in the prime of their lives, who are experiencing a lot of the issues that the average family faces. We need our voices and those voices to be heard. And so it's a difficult thing to balance that and encourage it. I think it is possible. It is there, but it's definitely harder. I see from my colleagues, a lot of them are either older or they have independent businesses that they run where, they don't necessarily have a 9-to-5 job or have set hours necessarily, so they have a little more flexibility. So there are certain advantages to that, and I think it is a difficult thing. But I think you could find a balance, and I think with my family, they didn't want this for me. This was not something necessarily that they thought about when I was younger, or even in college, that this is something they wanted for me. But they've been very encouraging. I think the thing that is unsaid between me and my family, between my wife, my parents, even my children, even though again it's unsaid, is that the sacrifice you make with your family is only worth it if you are trying to do something that helps other people, right? That makes a contribution to the community you live in, and that you do it for the right reasons. Don't do it for the reason of I enjoy seeing my name on a sign, I enjoy seeing my face on a mailer, I enjoy talking and having people listen to me, right? That's great. And ego is a big part of politics. Let's not pretend, right? This isn't the same. These aren't the same folks who join the priesthood or the religious services. I'm just not to denigrate that in any way, but I'm just saying this isn't the most modest of occupations, running for office or public service, right? So ego is a part of it, but don't let that be your motivating factor. Don't make it about you. Make it about what you can do for the less fortunate, for the community you live in, for your family, and for others through public service. And if you're able to do that, then it's rewarding. And then I think the people around you see that and they appreciate it. And also, I think that the voters, especially at the local level, they see that. They see that about when you're just about promoting yourself and puffing yourself up, and when you actually care about the results and actually care about who you're trying to help and who you're trying to serve. So I think that's one of the biggest factors, and one of the biggest things is, what is your motivation? What are you going to get out of it? And that makes it worth it.
Absolutely. Thank you. So the last major question, I have two light questions for you. Mm-hmm. Presidential elections coming up November 3rd. Your thoughts on it, predictions, advice?
I am, I've said since the beginning that it's a 50-50 election. I'll say that now. It really just, the scary thing is, unfortunately, our system is democratic, but it's very undemocratic or very unfair in the sense of the Electoral College specifically, because it is discriminatory against the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans on 2 of the last 5 elections have voted for a candidate and have not seen that candidate become president, right? The majority of people who voted for a person to be president, and that person was not seated as a president. That's unfortunate that the Electoral College and really the Senate map and other things are tilted towards less populations that are not as well populated as ours, right? Less densely populated populations. And I in no way say that those people shouldn't have as much of a voice as us. I just think that voice should be even. It should be 1-to-1, right? As close to possible as 1-to-1. And it's not. The smaller states and the more rural states have an outsized influence compared to states like New Jersey and New York and others that are larger and more densely populated. And so, unfortunately, the election is going to come down to, again, a few states: Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan. Now they're talking about Arizona. A few states. And so that's the scary part. Is if Hillary Clinton lost 4 states by basically 1% or less, if she wins 2 or 3 of those states, she would have won the election. She already won the popular vote. She would have won the electoral vote if she had gotten basically 1% more of the vote in a couple states, in literally 2 or 3 states. So that's the scary thing, is that could come down to a few people there. The second thing that makes it very scary is this mail-in ballot situation, and the fact that this Trump administration, they don't care about the norms or the rules. They only care about retaining power, right? And that's a very scary situation, because I think what's very likely to happen, and I think people need to prepare for this, and we need to talk about this, is that because so many people are going to be voting by mail, in a lot of states, especially states with close elections, Joe Biden could be win the election, but be losing on election day, because the majority or a lot of our voters, the majority of the people who are going to vote by mail are likely to be Democratic or Joe Biden type voters, whereas the people more likely to go in person and vote in person are Trump and Trump like voters. So it's very possible, I think probably likely, that on election night you're going to see Trump winning a lot of these states that are closely contested, and that the Biden votes are going to come in the days and the weeks, and maybe even a week or 2 later with some of these very closely contested states, and that creates a scary situation where Donald Trump declares victory on election night. People see his numbers, his numbers going up, and even though he hasn't won the election, even though it's not valid or anything, that he could declare victory, and that people could say that his election, quote unquote, is being stolen because votes are coming in after election day, even though that's not the way it works. You and I know how mail-in ballots work. They come in before election day. They get counted on election day, and oftentimes, because of the amount of votes, Sometimes it takes days or even a couple weeks sometimes to fully count those ballots. You're somebody who when the votes in the booth were counted. I remember one election when the votes in the booth were counted, you were losing, but then or your council slate was losing, and then when they counted all the mail-in ballots and everything, you won. And thankfully, thankfully nobody said, well, that's invalid because the votes came in after, quote unquote, after the polls closed. But anybody who understands anything about how politics works, anybody who understands about how our elections work, know that either vote is valid the same. It's the same one vote. But because of the climate we live in, because of our president spreading fear, misinformation, all of that, it's an incredibly scary situation that could be used as an invalid election or some kind of dirty politics. And then when you tie the Supreme Court into it, and the possibility that there could be a 6-3 split based on conservatives and liberals on the court, it's a very scary possibility, and I think we need to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, well, thank you for your insight. So now to the round of what did I not ask you that I should have asked you that you want to talk
about? I don't know. I mean, this was a pretty thorough interview. I don't know Mayor. I mean, I think I would really like to hear from you. From you as far as what is it that frustrates you the most in our community or in America right now? What frustrates you the most as far as somebody who, again, came from that immigrant perspective, but has risen and gotten involved in politics at a high level?
Right.
What is it that frustrates you about our community or about America at large right now in terms of involvement or civic involvement?
Well, I think the thing that frustrates me is obviously I came to the United States 1991. I was a teenager, and we had an image of the United States, and we've embraced it since we came here. I started as a volunteer fireman, volunteer in the local hospital. I wanted to give back to the community that gave so much to me. But we're starting to see that dream fall, right in front of our eyes, with the civil rights and liberties being slowly almost stripped away. That's actually frustrating me because, but I have faith in the United States. I have faith in the institutions, the systems that we have in place. And that is something that is very valuable. I truly appreciate it because I come from a country where it's very authoritarian. I mean, they've changed the constitution of Syria in 5 minutes to allow the son of Assad, the father, to become the president when he wasn't qualified. So, a constitution is something that's very sacred to me. And I think we need to continue to uphold it. We continue to defend it because it's definitely being violated on many terms at this point. This president has no regards for the Constitution, for the laws of the land. But I have faith in the system. I have faith in the American people that we will take our system back, repair it, and make it even stronger.
Yeah, well, inshallah, that let's hope and pray. But you're absolutely right, because the Constitution, I mean, as we tell people, the Constitution is just a piece of paper. The flag is just a piece of cloth, unless there is meaning and action behind it, right? For all of us, I mean, every American. But again, as Muslim Americans, I think it's absolutely true. And I tell people, I think it's a sin. I'm not a religious scholar. You're not a religious scholar, no. But I think it is sinful that you brought this up, and I think it's a brilliant point, and it's absolutely true. I tell people, listen, we have a lot of complaints about this country. We have a lot of things that we like when we talk about racial unrest. This country has a lot of way to go to be better, because we'll never be a perfect country because we're not a perfect people. We have a long way to go to be better, to be a more perfect people, right? But if you look at Muslims anywhere else in the world, Syria, you're from Syria, my parents are from Pakistan. You look at Muslims anywhere else in the world. I mean, there is no doubt that we are the people, as far as Muslims anywhere in the world, who have the most rights, the most liberties, the most opportunities, economic or otherwise. We are blessed. We're blessed with that. But at the same time, our faith calls upon us that those who have the most have to give the most and do the most. And so, personally, to me, I think of it as a sin. I think of it as a sin that you would say that you have been given this blessing to do something, to be in a place to be able to do something, and then say, well, it's not my job or not my responsibility, or I have this list of complaints, so so I'm not going to do anything about it. I think that's it's counterintuitive, not just to our being American, but I think it's counterintuitive to being Muslim, to say that I shouldn't be active, or I shouldn't be involved. So I'll just end on that point. But I do like to point that out to people, that our family members, our relatives, or our ancestors from different places around the world, like really none of them have the opportunity and the peace of mind to be able to do the things that we're able to do here.
Absolutely. Freeholder Assad Akhter, the first Muslim and South Asian freeholder elected to the county office in Passaic County, the state of New Jersey. One of two freeholders in the entire state. That is the highest office that Muslims elected officials currently hold, even though we have over 30 Muslim elected officials in such a small state. We're proud of that. But I thank you for your time, and I thank you for your nuggets of wisdom. And I thank you for everything that the Freeholder Board does for my community. My town is part of your county, so thank you very much. Thank you for your time and for knowledge. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you were inspired by this conversation, and that if you need any further information, this is not live, obviously, and I have posted the Freeholders website, www.assadakhter.com, or his social media is handle Assad Akhter. You can find them on Facebook, Twitter, Freeholder as well.
Twitter, Instagram,
as well. So you could direct any questions to him directly. I am on social media also at Mayor Khairullah. That is for Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You have any questions for us, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we will be more than happy to answer your questions. You could also leave a comment below. This will be on YouTube and on Facebook. So I ask that you kindly, if you like this conversation, that you subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the like button on this episode. And if you're watching it on Facebook, also join my Facebook page, Mayor Khairullah. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, until next time, be safe, be blessed, and be active. Assalamu alaikum.